checking it out. It's not a UWM pen. They have good ones.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to interview you. And just for the record, on the audio, if you could introduce yourself and kind of your background in relation with Villa Terrace.
I'm Valerie Kupczak Rios. I am the estate gardener here at Villa Terrace since early 2012. And I have a background in horticulture, an associate degree, and I'm an arborist certified. And I enjoy this beautiful garden for 28 hours a week.
Something that we're really interested in with this study is the relationship of the villa to the historic Water Tower neighborhood. And as you tend the gardens, you really tend a major visual piece to this neighborhood. I was wondering if you could kind of tell us what you feel about having that as a responsibility, and it's in one way, and how you feel it really impacts this neighborhood from people who come visiting versus people who live around here.
Well, when I tend this garden, I am mainly concerned about its health and longevity, knowing that the beauty of it is what people see. I recognize it as an awesome landscape, especially the latest design, which is the formal Renaissance garden design. It's really the only one I've ever known here. I did not see the original garden before it was redone 11 or 12 years ago. I do recognize its importance in the neighborhood as a historic home, first of all, because that's what most people see from the street, or at least they see the columns and the bars of the drive, the wrought iron gate and fencing there. But it is an open place, even though it looks rather private from the street. So I know that there are a lot of people that wonder about this particular residence because it isn't as obvious a home like the others in the neighborhood. It is part of the styling of it, the Italian styling that gives it that look. But once you enter, I think, once you enter the courtyard, you realize that you're in quite a different architectural setting than any of the Germanic style homes in the neighborhood. Every other place seems to have a door that you walk into, a front door. We have a forecourt entrance that allows you into the courtyard entrance that allows you into the front door. So it's quite different. And I think quite captivating, and in the sense that it projects you into another time and culture. Then by walking through the courtyard, through the house, and looking over the terrace at the garden, at the main part of the garden, I have heard numerous remarks about how it looks like you're on the Mediterranean, which is exactly what the purpose of building this home on this bluff was. The site was chosen to make it look like it was in Italy on the bank of the Mediterranean. The value of that for the neighborhood and for the whole community is quite special. I think it's very unique in this city and in this state and even in the United States. It's a very special garden. And being the estate gardener here is a really special honor for me.
I imagine that you can look back and see what you tend to, and it's really pretty special.
I've got good bones to work with here. The design is quite special. It's very culturally true. The theme of the mythology in the Renaissance garden and the plantings are meant to mimic what would have been 16th century type garden in a very special home as this is. Yeah, it's a real special place, and there's a lot to take care of here.
Yeah, I imagine you stay really busy.
I am busy all the time, and when I'm not here working in it, I'm thinking about what has to be done. So yeah, I am really quite a part of it.
You mentioned that it's is it only Renaissance? Have you done Renaissance gardens before, or is this really your first garden like that?
This is the first formal garden I've ever worked in. The formal aspect is shown by the very strict balance. What's on the left is balanced by a very similar design on the right. So it's very centrally oriented with an embellishment or a focal point in the center, and then it's balanced by the same look on either side. I have to admit, when I first looked at the garden to interview for the job, I wondered if it would keep me interested long enough. I wondered how long it would keep me interested, actually. And my question was answered quite quickly, as the views of the garden are so fantastic in that I have a special insight into what's going on with the plants in the garden by being able to observe them from the view above, besides on the ground level and looking around. As a horticulturist, I am all involved in the plant health, especially in a garden like this with its formal balance. You can't afford to lose major things in it. So there's 40 Armstrong Freeman maples in the garden that create 2 alleys on either side of the garden. That's 40 trees that are all similar in growth height and size. And the thought of a loss of one of those trees is, I don't want it to happen. I mean, no one does, because that's the structure, the bones of the garden. So I pay particular care to those trees, and then the plantings that surround them too. And in a garden, it is a growing medium. There are going to be losses. Gardeners expect that there can be losses. It's just one of the things that goes along with anybody's garden. Weather is unpredictable. It can't always be determined what will endure cold, hard, wet, freezing, thawing winters, and we've had some losses. For me, being able to see the garden from different views helps me observe what is going on as far as lighting, in other words, sunlight in the garden, shadow, where different plants lie within those aspects of the garden. And it helps me understand how to keep them healthy and what the problems might be because of the conditions. So I find it a really interesting microcosm to work within, because I have special views of it.
How does it work with, because the landscape is kind of an ever-changing thing, and this garden isn't heavily manicured, it's kind of well composed. And how do you deal with changes, say losses of plants, like you were talking about? Do you normally kind of replace back to the way it was, or does that become an opportunity maybe for, I guess, how much say do you have in the landscape changing versus staying at a certain way?
I was hired as a maintenance person for the garden. I have special skills that I've studied and keep certified at. In other words, I stay current on the health of different plants in the garden. I do not consider a need to change the look of what was designed here, because it was particularly designed for this property and for the character of the property. So the basic things that are in the garden need to remain the same. Some things that can change are aspects or plants that may be struggling with the conditions, and for the most part, everything's doing okay. Sometimes we need to adjust organic matter in the soil for to keep things greener. That in the case of the trees, the hydrangeas are very self-sustaining, which is great. Actually, most of the plants in the garden are very self-sustaining. Mostly what they need is water, and that's true of all plants in the landscape. We have many natives that don't need any special care, and that's great because it would be difficult to get water into those areas. The only area in our garden that is irrigated, and that means that there's a sprinkler system, is the main lawn, the central area of the lawn in the lower garden. So every other area that may need water needs to have a hose or a sprinkler taken to it and then be controlled, control watered. In other words, you can't just leave it on all day and hope that it's okay. And in a site like this, it's really hard to just have things on a timer necessarily, because things can't always be considered perfect unless they're installed as a timed situation. So in 2012, we had a drought, and a huge part of being the gardener here was hauling hoses around and watering the plants. We have a unique condition here. The hillside, or it's called the orchard, or traditionally it was called the bride's orchard. The crabapple trees are on a slope. And what a slope will do in a drought condition is dry off sooner, because any water or rain that would hit it would actually run downhill with gravity. So there's specific ways to water in order to keep the soils moist. And the uphill part generally is the hardest part to keep watered. So there's a lot to think about in keeping trees growing and looking good. And I have to say, I feel good about what I was able to do last year, considering the length of the drought. And this year, the crabapple trees look very good. The blossoms looked very good, and the health of the trees look good. I feel happy about that. There are some trees that did not do well in the very difficult winter that we had. We didn't get much snow in the beginning of winter 2012-2013 until later, when we had 3 consecutive wet snows. And we lost a major component in the garden, which were some Mountbatten junipers on either side of the fish pond. And what happened is, over the years, there had been some damage. Junipers generally take on big snow loads, and they will bend over, but then they seem to respond back. This wasn't the case this year. The snow was so heavy and so high in the tree that it caused them to break, and they are really beyond repair. So we will have to address that. It's very expensive to replant trees, especially the size that we would need to make interesting, or excuse me, a balanced look in this garden. So right now we're looking into costs for that. We're looking at who can take them away, in other words, cut them down and take them out of the garden, and what our steps would be to replace them. Should we dig into the soil of the slope? Very touchy area because of the slope. You don't want to upset what's been there and stable. So we're looking for what that's going to cost us. We also have other features in the garden that need care too. So money is always a factor. And that's hard to put out to the public that comes to see the garden. They wonder, why is that broken? Why are those weeds there? Why is the water not in the fish pond? All these things cost money, and our money is provided by private groups. We fundraise for sponsors to help maintain the garden, and it's a constant effort to make sure we have enough for when some real emergency comes. I mean, if a tree should fall, it would have to be addressed immediately. So some of the other things kind of just go along. The beauty of them, even without the running parts, seem to hold up. Where we have the broken junipers right now, they're still green, kind of, and it is interesting for people to see what things look like when they're damaged. And I think that people can learn from that. The junipers are really quite heavy for our climate, our snowy climate and our wet snowy climate. They're also taller than we're expected to be. In other words, when they were put in the landscape, the growing height would be about 12 to 15 feet. But it's a new variety within the course of the years that we've had them here. In other words, they haven't been around for real long to always know, and evidently they were sited very well, and they get enough water and sunlight. They're about 20 feet tall, and every added foot of height means more weight on the top, which means the snow is more damaging. So it's an interesting balancing act between replacing, keeping things looking nice, and getting enough funding to do it all. That's a long answer.
That's great. You're talking about the trees, and it's good for people to see not these perfect condition plants. And what goes on for the winter months? Is there a lot of I know you can't do any maintenance during the winter months, but is there a lot of planning for how it's going to look in the winter?
There is a lot of planning and a lot of activity in the winter. In the garden, in the Renaissance garden here, there is no real maintenance that goes on. However, I do come to the garden a few times throughout the winter to check and see if there's been any snow damage, because broken branches or some conditions maybe can be corrected if they're caught soon enough. Like the junipers, for instance, I was able to knock some of the snow off during one of the snow events, but I wasn't able to keep up with what nature pounded them with. So, and it's just beautiful to come and see what the garden looks like. I mean, to put all this time in the summer growing months, to not see it during its dormant season, I miss it. I miss the garden when I'm not here, but it has a whole nother beauty in the winter with no leaves on the trees and just seeing the bare structures. It's a perfect time to see the structures of the trees and see what kind of maintenance they might need as far as pruning. So that's one of the things you can do in the winter. Also, this winter, I stored a few plants that were out on the terrace. I stored them in the garage, so I had to come and water them a little bit. Mostly, the winter is spent planning on what's going to happen the following year. You might review what problems you had to see how you would adjust scheduling to make them better the following year, to maintain them better. It's also a time that's well spent attending conventions and educational events where professionals get together and discuss the latest research that's done for woody plants and for perennial vegetated plants, and even what new plants are out to put together the annuals. The annuals in the garden are one thing that I do have a handle on for changing them. The annuals do change from year to year. You asked me earlier what am I able to change as the gardener here? And the annuals are the thing that we replant every year. So we discuss what colors will be in the garden depending on what kind of activities are going on. For instance, 2013 is a year of the gala. Every other year we have a fundraiser, which we call gala, in the garden in the later summer. And this year for the gala, the colors were magenta and teal. So very difficult to get teals in the garden, except for like green leafy matter. But the flowers are bright pinks and bright light violets that mimic these magenta colors. And I ran a palette of darker colors in the lower garden. And then as you come up the hill and into the terrace of the home, and then in the courtyard of the villa, the colors got lighter in pastel. So we do actually consider what the theme is going to be. And the earlier months of the spring, when it's still wintry, is when I research what is available in the greenhouses in the area. And that's how I determine what kind of annuals we'll be able to plant in the pots and in the courtyard, on the terrace, and in the beds in the lower garden. So winter is recharging time for the garden and for the gardener, but it's certainly not totally downtime.
Sounds like you're really, you mentioned you miss it when you're away from it. It sounds like you're really attached to it. And the way you talked about it's really part of the villa as a whole, I guess that makes me think of your relationship to the garden being maybe similar to the relationship of people in the neighborhood to the villa. And that if it wasn't here, what would be the impact if the villa wasn't here at all? Would it be similar to impact if the garden wasn't in the villa? I don't know if that's confusing.
I think I know what you mean. The villa is the home that was built for the family that moved to this neighborhood. And that's, the home is about, or the neighborhood is about the homes in it. And this particular neighborhood has some of the most amazing architecture in it. The villa was built because people needed a home, and the garden is a traditional part of a home and the surroundings of the home. The earliest gardens were probably for vegetables and herbs, to grow things for people to use in their cooking and to put on their tables. The wonderful part of a garden is it's beautiful too. So the two places are integral. the garden was designed to enhance the villa. And the villa is the central part of the garden. So when you view the garden from the lower area and look up the hill, the villa is the central gem of the garden. And it's the reason why the garden is there. So the two pieces are really one. And yet they both have hugely different maintenance needs. The garden has the wonderful ability, the growing plants have a wonderful ability to endure so many things, as do homes. But and as things age in the garden, they also decline. And it's maybe more manageable to adjust those kinds of things. And in a lot of cases, people don't even know sometimes what they're looking at in a garden. You can put something that isn't so special, and someone might not notice it if it's placed correctly. That's not true of many really expert gardeners. They're very critical about things like that. The home here, having its historic features, okay, there's a lot of fine craftsmanship in it that's so hard to replace in this newer time. And the materials are so, well, they're just experiencing the harsh winters that we have. This villa is meant to mimic a building that would have been built on the Mediterranean Sea, which has much milder climate. So it endures really harsh winters, and there are great needs in it. I do have great concerns about the villa being maintained and staying in good shape to remain here, because without the villa, really, the garden would not be as important.
Very much so. I couldn't imagine just looking up the hill and not seeing the villa on top. How are we doing on time?
We're at about 28 minutes.
Okay. Left?
We've been running for 28 minutes.
Okay. Don't want to go over.
I don't
too
mind.
much, but,
Yeah, I don't know where else you want to go with this. I mean, I didn't really answer how much I love the place.
Well, you keep referencing back to it. I can feel that you really have a connection here.
I wouldn't mind talking about that.
So yeah, if you would mind talking about your connection with the place.
Okay. My connection with Villa Terrace goes back quite a few years. I have lived in Milwaukee since 1963. I always appreciated architecture. And in the 70s, I started exploring some of the architecture in Milwaukee. I worked downtown, so I was in the midst of all the older buildings. I saw many of them come down because of age. And so I do have a really soft spot in my heart about these older buildings. Seeing them be wrecked by a wrecking crew, and knowing all of the craftspeople that invested their time and their passion in those buildings, it has always been really difficult for me. I am an artist. I have an artist's background. So that tied in with my love of architecture has, I've kind of built on that through the years. And my artwork often reflects architectural features. So I find it inspiring. I find this villa inspiring. Every day that I'm here, there's certain ways of looking at the garden through a certain archway or through the pillars, the banisters and the balustrades. What do you call the parts?
Balustrades.
The balustrades. There's just so many interesting views. I have friends who've been married here at the villa. I've come over the course of the years. I've come to different exhibits here. I am not an East Sider, so whenever I come here, it's very special to me. The places I've lived in the city were fairly simple architecture, mostly family styles, South Side wooden homes that have a character all their own, but not the variety that is on this East Side, and especially in this neighborhood. The variety of architectural styles here is so great. So this villa does have a special place in my heart for all of those reasons. I also appreciate the history of the era that it represents. And I'm also a clothing designer, and I learned history through what people wore in different periods of time. And this particular time, this Renaissance time, just includes all of the things that I appreciate about art. It's got the architecture, the art of the Renaissance period. The name of the garden was just, compelling to me because of its relationship to a wonderful period in art and growth in art style and talent, and availability to show off such wonderful things. And being an artist and being a gardener, everything that I appreciate is in this one place. So my connection is pretty deep, and I feel somewhat, possibly sometimes misplaced ownership of this home, because I'm here a lot, and I love just thinking about the family that lived here and what it must have been like to have all of these wonderful aspects to see every day, to look out on the lake, like from where we're sitting right now, the activity out there, the changing color of the lake, and how it affects your mood, and it affects the light inside this structure. And I will always appreciate having this experience here.
If you could imagine thinking back to the family who lived here, what do you think it would have been like when they added in the beach area at the end where Lincoln Memorial is now?
What year was that? Do you know?
1936.
Okay, and the house was built in 1923. I bet they were a little disappointed to, first of all, well, I don't know a lot of the history of the family. I know that there were children here, and I'm sure that affected them, because having a street there then sort of on the property probably meant that the kids had to be more careful. Some of them would have been fairly young. They had a big enough yard to play in. I'm sure that wasn't a problem. But then to get to the water, they would have had to cross a street. Now, kids and streets mean that there has to be more supervision. I'm sure they felt that they lost some of their privacy. I'm sure that the people who were able to use the street felt that they gained something by being able to look at this property where they hadn't been able to before, unless they could be on the water, which is only for a few people, that they would have that available to them. Certainly, a street added anywhere, especially in a neighborhood, changes things. I'm sure the access was a blessing and a curse. for the family who lived here. Yeah, I didn't know what year that it went in, but that sounds pretty early on. I'm sure that it changed a bit of the harmony in this place. Luckily, it wasn't the kind of traffic we have now, because when I'm in the garden now, and I'm sure your recordings show the traffic that is constant down there. I must say, there are days when you don't notice it much, because depending on the direction of the wind, it can make it quieter. Car tires and truck tires are bigger now. They make a whole lot more noise than they did in the older days. Engines in the older days might have been louder than they are now. Gee, it would have been something to see. Wish I were here.
Yeah. Made me think of something. Now I can't remember what. Something you commented on, the sound.
Oh, the wind.
I was thinking the wind and the way that, I know when I'm in the courtyard I can feel the temperature difference with wind versus when I'm on the terrace and down at the bottom of the grass. It really is interesting with the bluff, how the wind is another aspect that becomes part of the different spaces and places in this entire property. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on the wind.
Tons of thoughts. The interesting isn't a big enough word for all of the different microenvironments that are on this property. Starting at the front gate, there is a grilled ironwork with columns, and behind it are shrubs that are planted they're surely 50 years old. I'm not sure if they're older than that. I haven't really gotten underneath them yet in the year and a half that I've been here to really see what the understructure looks like. But just blocking the entryway with those, they're not all that old. I have seen older pictures. Blocking the wind means changing the circulation in the garden. And that means that the insects, for instance, on plants aren't blown away as easily. Wind is very effective for blowing insects away from. So when you plant things closer together and you're in an area where the wind can't move through, you start building different environments for plants and it affects how they grow. Entering the courtyard is a whole nother environment. There's only windows on one side, and they're up high, and they have bars on them for security and privacy. But it blocks the wind a little more. And so you have a closed environment where the sun hits only one side mainly of the structure within the courtyard. It changes what you plant. Some things have to be for shade, some things for sun. Then you walk through the villa and you're on the terrace, and the sun beats on it most of the day on a terracotta floor, so you have really hot conditions in the hottest part of the summer. Lots of freeze and thaw because of the cold at night and then the warm sun during the day. Wonderful place to be in the evening. You're in the shade. And that's why those sleeping porches are on the east side of the house up above. I've often thought how wonderful that must be to feel those cool breezes. Then you go down the hillside, which gets most of the hot sun during the day. After about 4 o'clock, it's in shade. Wonderful time to work in the garden when the breezes start coming up off the lake. What also comes up off the lake is fog. And there's a good amount of it in the spring. The fog rolls up the hill, and I've watched this happen. It's the most amazing thing. I've stood in the forecourt and looked west because I was observing some plants there on a foggy day. The fog will roll up the hill, come over the villa, which is a very low-lying structure between some taller parts on the sides. So it rolls right up the middle of the villa. It starts to drop down when it reaches the courtyard because it's an open area. And when it gets on the other side in the forecourt, it drops down on the ground. It's like a wave that washes over the villa. And then it's stopped right there because there's shrubs and trees planted there that hold it right there. So it's a very challenging micro area of the environment. It's its own little weather situation happening right there. So observation in this job is huge, to try to figure out what is affecting the plants and how to adjust the conditions. So I'm going to have to make some adjustments in all of those plants that are getting really tall in the front. And actually, I think personally, and I'll discuss it with the designers and the historians, personally, I think some of the shrubs need to be lowered so that more of the architecture of the forecourt in the front of the entryway to the courtyard will show more. I think that people coming into the neighborhood, visitors, will understand better what's here, and by removing some of the plant material, it will make it look like it's more public than private and more open than hidden. Yet to come. There's a lot of work to do in the small period of time that I'm here. And we're working on adjusting how things can go maintenance-wise and seasonally wise. It's not a... There needs to be some adjustment made in how maintenance can go in this garden, as well as the structure, too. I know that there are things being done to help the structure be maintained as well.
Yeah, you're talking about the fog like a wave.
Mm.
Do you have any more thoughts on the relationship of maybe the villa or just the gardens or both to the water? I know there's the kind of obvious things like the fountain is a relation of the two parts, but something we're really interested in is not only how does it relate to the neighborhood, but how does it all become, a connection to Lake Michigan?
Well, certainly the homes built here were taking, the owners were taking advantage of this beautiful scenery that the lake provides. We are so lucky to have Lake Michigan as our, we take it for granted, as a matter of fact. I believe Milwaukeeans take it for granted until they come to a place like this and realize how lucky the people that live here are to see it every day. Everyone that can see the lake every day is so fortunate, and I think they all recognize how fortunate they are to have a treasure like that. That being said, water is a very integral part in Italian architecture and gardens. I think that generally in an Italian garden, a Renaissance garden, there are water features. We have a number of them here at the villa. The courtyard has a fountain that had always been there. The style of it has been adjusted since the original architecture, but it still is a feature for sound. It attracts birds, as you all know, hanging out in the courtyard. There's quite a few birds out there, especially in the springtime during nesting time. There is a water stairway that goes through the center of the garden, and emanates from the villa as it falls down the hillside. That's a very unique water feature. The pump that sends water to the top of that sends water about 35 feet up. And it's a circulatory system, so the same water is being utilized, although there's some new being pumped in for dehydration and water loss from splashing over and things like that. But the water features in the villa, I think, tie it to the lake, as the lake is the background for the villa. The water features just add a wonderful sound that's so it adds a wonderful element to being inside this property. I can't think of what would look better looking through the columns and looking at the garden. I can't think of a better background than the lake, because what it does is it changes all the time, for one. So it never gets old. Nothing ever seems the same because of the background color changing, and the sky. You can see so much sky here. Same thing from down below. When you look up at the villa, you see so much sky. It's almost, there's days when the clouds come over that villa. It actually looks like you're looking at a Greek temple with where the gods may reside from time to time. And it's wonderful, these weather elements that seem to just pop out of the landscape that is part of this place. I really can't think of a better background. This is a view above the sea. It's Sopra Mare. It is.
It's very beautiful the way you explain it. So
About 10
you're
minutes.
talking about the sounds, and I definitely recognize in the courtyard the birds and the water, how that really creates a place just with the sound. Are there any other really special places in the garden that have their own sound?
Well, the water stairway gurgles as it rolls down the stairs. And you can't hear it too much from above unless the wind is coming off the lake. Then sometimes you can catch it. I think as you move higher, it's harder to hear sounds. You tend to hear it when you're in the lower garden and when you're more central in the lower garden. The shrubs alongside the water stairway are quite large, and they need to be renewed, which means they need to be pruned back quite extensively. My plan to renew those shrubs is going to include taking off quite a bit of them along the outsides. And when I do that, it's going to open up the understory of those large shrubs, which actually are looking like small trees now. So they're yews, and yews are renewable. In other words, they will grow new little branches over time along the older stems. Not a lot of plants, not a lot of woody plants do that. I have some experience in renewing those shrubs, so I feel confident that doing that will rejuvenate that woody shrub. They're just becoming too large for the structure, and I think the balance is starting to be lost. And these are things that I discuss with the garden designer, the architectural landscaper, Dennis Bittner, Marguerite Harvey. We talk about those balance items in the garden, because I can adjust them, but I need to have their input on how they should look. So they have the vision for that. When I do make that adjustment on those U's and take down the side growth of them, it will open up an area where the sound can emanate then from those water stairs. And I'm really looking forward to being able to hear that water drop down those steps from different parts in the garden. When you walk down the wooden stairs on the south end of the property down to the lower garden, you have no idea that those water stairs are there. Now, that is kind of interesting in its own way because it makes it a surprise element when you walk to the center of the garden. I would kind of like to make it also an element as you're walking down to the garden, a sound feature that you hear and wonder, where is that coming from? And then when you see it, you'll be just as surprised, and yet you'll know, oh, that's what I'm hearing. So I like those kinds of things. Other sounds in the garden, this time of year is probably the time when you're more likely to be attacked by red-winged blackbirds in the garden. And when I say attack, I don't know of anyone that's actually been touched by them, but they're very protective of their nestlings, and they nest in the rondelles where the statues of Hercules and Diana are in the two opposing rondelles on either side of the garden. And the arborvitaes there are perfect nesting areas for the red-winged blackbirds especially. They don't like me. And I'll tell you what, when I'm there alone, they tell me in more ways than one. Generally, when people are in larger numbers, like if there are 3 or 4 in a group, they aren't as aggressive. But one person, they're very aggressive. So because I don't really trust them, and because they dive at you and as they get to the bottom of their dive, they squawk at you, and that's the part that's kind of challenging. I wear a hat for sun, but it's also so I don't have to look at them. And when I don't see them, they don't bother me so much because they get pretty close. They can be pretty frightening, for someone. So when there's visitors in the garden and they're walking that way, I warn them because it isn't for everybody to have a bird swooping down at you. So it's kind of funny because I wear that broad-brimmed hat for the sun, but I can see the shadows of the birds, and I know how close they'll get if I don't pay any attention to them, but it's okay because I got my hat on. So. Other sounds, the traffic, sometimes the water, the lake is so loud, it's astounding how loud it can be. And on cloudy, wavy days, windy days, when the wind is coming off the lake, you hear it crashing all day long in the garden. And sometimes it's like, how can I stand this, all day? You lose sight of it. It's pretty interesting. But that's just part of the character of this wonderful place. It's all interrelated. And really one element blends with the other in all different ways throughout the course of the season.
Well, I don't want to go over time too much. If you have any closing thoughts?
I do. We haven't talked about the visitors in the garden.
Visitor, yes.
The whole idea of having maintenance in the garden is to keep the plants healthy so that they look good when visitors come here. Anyone who has a garden feels proud of it. Even with weeds and broken trees and all of that, there's a lot to feel proud of here, and we know that we're going to get to those things in the garden. Generally, when the visitors come down, especially if it's a first time, and often it doesn't matter how many times, they always comment on how beautiful the garden is. And I can't tell you how good it makes the gardener feel, because I know all of the things I still have to do in there. But having no one in the garden is a special moment. But having people in the garden walk through and enjoy it while you know you're the one who takes care of it is even more special. Having many people in the garden at one time being delighted by it is like being the host of a party and knowing that your guests are having a good time. One of the most special moments, I've had a few now, of more special moments, are in the fall, one was in the fall, when a group of visitors was here from out of town. The bus had dropped them off above, they walked down, and then the bus was picking them up in the lower garden at the Neptune Gate. And there is a white ash on the south boundary of the garden, outside of the garden. But it's a huge tree, and the white ash, when it goes into color, it's yellow and red and orange at the same time. Well, there was a breeze coming from the south, and it was blowing these leaves into the center of the garden, I mean the middle of the garden. And it was like raining leaves. It was like being in a snow globe, but an autumn globe, a leaf globe there, with the leaves falling down. And the people were walking through them and just being amazed by the moment. And I was up above, able to watch all of this. And it was so very delightful to see them enjoy something that you might not ever experience like that in an open, beautiful space like that, than to see these leaves dropping down. Surely it brought back other memories than that they had. It did for me. And then just not too long ago, we had a event here at the villa that I was a guest for. So how cool is that, being a guest at a place that I love and knowing that I helped make it presentable for this gathering. And one of the activities was, it was a theme-based fundraiser based on fairy tales. And one of the things that they did was they had some young little girls, actually. They were dressed as fairies, and in the evening, the little girls went down the stairs and down into the garden. All the guests were up above on the terrace, and the little girls as fairies were running around down in the lower garden. So from above, it was like looking at little firefly girls running around against the background of that dark green turf. It was so delightful. I'm sure that everyone will have that memory of these little children just in pure joy there. And did I mention the moonrise above the lake? Oh, it's the best. I plan on working in the garden when I know the moon is rising full. But we have had events here called Villa Luna, when they're scheduled for the full moon rise, and we all keep our fingers crossed that the weather will be good so you can see the moon rise. It's the most marvelous thing to see the orb rise above the lake line and see the sky still sometimes colored. Oftentimes it's still fairly light, where you can see it change along with the moonrise. It's wonderful. Sounds. Summerfest is right down the road. Summerfest is coming. They have a new BMO stage that's positioned further out on the lake, and it's opened up in a way that I hear the music coming from Summerfest, liking Summerfest. It's great with me, and it's nice. It adds like a festival atmosphere here. The air show. Oh my gosh, you need earplugs. I didn't realize how loud and shocking. I understand why people in the neighborhood would be upset about the air show here every year. I really, really do. On the other hand, I have a very soft part of my heart. I love aircraft and flying. I love flight. Seeing what we can see from this place with it cleared out and manicured in a way like it is, it's so open and available to see that. Well, we're on the center line, by the way, for the air show. In other words, the ridge of the villa is the center line that the jets fly over. And if you don't know they're coming, I happen to be sitting right in the middle of the garden, right in the concrete seat below in the lower terrace, when an I don't know, F-16, whatever it is that comes really fast and is really loud, and I think it was the F-16. And I still, when I think of it, it makes me shudder how it affected me. It was like being struck by lightning. I got to think that's what it would feel like and still survive. It's incredibly loud. And then bouncing off the lake and bouncing off the hard structures around here, yeah, it was something. It was something. So this is where to be for the air show.
Yeah, I've been at the water tower during the air show, and they a lot of times go over that. I know being under those, just looking up when those guys go over, it's a shock to your body.
Yeah. For all the complaints that you'll hear about the east side and how the weather, it takes longer to be spring here and stuff. People that live here love it. They love it. All the things that are going on here, the birds that come through. The water is very important for migratory birds. The water with the shoreline. When birds migrate, they're looking for a place to land and a place to eat. And if you have ever experienced what it's like here when the midges hatch and the little insects are in clouds here, it's amazing. And still there's people running and they're covering their faces, and there's kids squealing. Oh, and the bugs are it's kind of awful, really, because they're just everywhere. You're breathing them, but you can see them in clouds. But that is what the birds are looking for food as they migrate in. So this orchard, the apple orchard, this year I was able to observe more the different birds that came through, and I saw a lot of warblers, which are very short. There's a short time span as they're moving through, and they're very beautiful, and they have beautiful songs. So what a treat! What a treat! I really can't think of a bad moment in this garden while it's being cared for.
One thing I did want to ask, we chatted with Gail yesterday, and she mentioned that she would take seasonal pictures of the garden. Is there a place that we can find those, or where can we take a look at them?
I have her file of seasonal pictures. That's very good, actually. I take a lot of pictures in the garden for maintenance purposes, to know what things look like during different parts of the season. She has a great what is it? Compilation of pictures that I'm sure you're welcome to. Yeah.
She mentioned to talk to you about looking at them.
Yeah, it's nicely put together.
That would be wonderful if we can just look at them and maybe take photos of them or
Still want to see them eventually.
Okay. Yeah, and I have some as well, like that moment with the people in the garden with the
yeah,
leaves
that-
flying. I
oh,
do.
we would love
I
that.
do. I carry my camera. How can you not take pictures in a place like this? I allowed some people to come in the other day. I was working by the gate and they were standing there, and I let them in because standing outside the gate, it's something to see it. But boy, just walking 5 feet into that gate, I think you did that the other day. Did you walk
We
outside?
don't walk through the gate.
Oh, you need to do that. I mean,
What's the difference between?
well, you need to do that, have the gate closed, and be looking at it, and then have someone welcome you in that gate. It's like from some fairy tale, It's really neat. It has a little creak to it sometimes, but they were standing there and talking, and I saw the first butterfly in the garden, and it had landed on that urn that's on the crescent bench. It was sitting on that urn. Now, what better gift do you get than that? It found the one place that was a focal point of that. Things like that happen here more often than.
Yeah, any photographs you have of those moments, we'd love to have.
Sure.
Those, really go along with your story as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So, the only other thing we'll do is if we could ask to take a picture of you maybe next to your favorite spot in the garden probably hard to pick a favorite.
Do you want to do that right away, or can you do that another?
We can do it another time since we'll be back.
Yeah. I have some contractors coming right now, and I'll think about that. I'll think about where the favorite spot is. So what time do you have?
10 till 1.
So,
Noon.
Sorry, 10 till 12.
That's all right. East Coast time.
so
Well, I enjoyed it. Thank you for
thank you
for helping me put all that together. Your questions were very good.
Thank you. No, you're
Beautiful
very,
stories.
very good stories and
Oh.
very passionate about it. So
Thanks a lot.
makes it all the more enjoyable to listen to.
I feel pretty lucky. I do feel pretty lucky. Well, you guys, I can't wait to see how you put it all together, because I'm certainly got a lot of editing to do.
Yeah.
We will, if you want to give us your email address, we got a couple people's addresses if they want a link once we're finished.
Absolutely.
Feel free to write it down. We're done in mid-July. That's when we complete this project. So we'll have a website, and it'll include the different groups as well. So we're just one group focusing on the Villa Terrace.
It'll be a short documentary.
Yes.
So you got the best place, huh? So what else are you working on? The water tower? How about the homes, the other homes in the neighborhood?
There's a group, looking at various homes, people who allowed us to go in and measure them.
Oh, Joe
Joe Libnock. Yeah.
Libnock.
He got interviewed this morning.
How did it go? He was nervous a
Yeah,
little
We don't
bit.
haven't
know.
heard.
I think,
Yeah.
It may still be going for all I know.
He was more concerned about how things looked. I said, heck, people aren't looking so close.
we
They're,
want stories.
Yeah.
Mesmerized is a beautiful home. But we're going to do the Vandalia residence, that large one comes over.
oh, with the open
Yeah,
opening in the structure
that big, massive structure. on
Drive-through?
on Back Bay.
where on Back Bay, the one they've been working on.
That's very old. Yeah, no, there's the one they're working on the corner. It's all the way towards the lake.
I haven't really seen that one. I have to drive back there and look.
It's,
Oh, with a
massive.
big open back. The
Mhm.
big.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a condo, isn't it?
Yeah, so we won't be going into it.
Okay.
It'll be just,
More just their
interviewing her.
relationship with the villa,
Yeah.
the history of the place.
But, what else? What else?
Who else have we interviewed? Well, yesterday were the ladies on the board.
I was seeing other places.
Oh, sorry.
I think the water tower is documented a little bit.
We were doing
A
the
lot of this has
beach.
been done already.
The beach.
The beach, yeah.
So you have to
That's
stop
the
at North Point for lunch.
Yeah,
There's
there's
the group who's been going to tiki bars
Mm.
and
Yeah.
North Point.
custard stand.
Interviewing people they meet along the way.
Uh-huh.
So
And then there are a series of houses that we haven't actually seen. We've only been working on the Joe's
Mhm.
house, but there are several others.
Cool project.
Yeah.
Are you getting paid?
getting credit myself.
Credit's good.
Paying
Credits,
to do it.
yeah.
we are paying to do
Other,
it.
Yeah.
other people, I don't think.
I'm not a student here, so
Yeah.
I'm not paying to participate,
Pro
but I
bono.
want the research experience.
Okay, so that's a form of payment. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great experience.
Yeah.
It's beyond what I expected.
It's better than a classroom, so, yeah.
And
I
get to
kind of
come
figured
here
it
all the
was
time.
yeah. What?
You get to come here all the time.
Now you know my world a little bit. But, gotta make sure that the other people that come into this world are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So, well,
Alright.
thanks again.
Thank you.